The
See
cattle
here,
came
Ezra
off the
Whitfield,
trailer at 6
livestock
in the
exhibitor.
morning,
And right
not
there,
because
Whitfield,
6
first
was the
place. I
required
see.
time,
Welcome,
which
Mr.
was
Whitfield.
7, but because Ezra Whitfield had been doing county fairs for 31 years and had learned through 31 years of specific accumulated knowledge about livestock in unfamiliar environments that the hour between 6 and 7 was the best hour for getting animals settled into new pens before the noise and the crowds arrived and the animals' stress levels climbed in ways that affected the way they presented in the ring. This was the kind of knowledge that is not written down anywhere. It is not in the extension service pamphlets or the livestock management manuals or the agricultural science courses at Ohio State. It is in the experience of 31 consecutive fairs in the specific data of 31 iterations of bringing animals to this particular environment and observing what the environment produced in them and adjusting the process accordingly. It is the knowledge of what 6 o'clock versus 7 o'clock produced in specific animals in the specific conditions of the Harmon County Fairground livestock pavilion on the south side of the grounds where the heat arrived at 9 and was serious by noon. He had developed this knowledge 1 year at a time. He had applied it this morning. He had unloaded the animals in the specific order he had determined over years of observing which ones settled fastest and which ones settled more easily when certain others were already in the pen. The bulls first because they established the calm of the space, then the older cows because they followed the bull's example, then Piper, who was young enough to still take her cues from the older animals, and who was better off entering a settled pen than being settled into a pen that was still finding its equilibrium. The process had taken 14 minutes. By 6:14, all 5 animals were in Bay 7 eating hay-oriented correctly in the space at a level of calm that he had learned to read in the specific quality of their attention, the way they stood, the rate of their eating, the position of their ears. They were fine. They were ready for a fair. He had arrived at the Harmon County Fairgrounds at 5:45. The fairground before a fair is a particular kind of place. It is a place in the process of becoming what it is going to be, assembling itself from its components. The vendor trucks pulling in, the crews running cables to the entertainment stage, the livestock division staff opening the pavilion bays and checking the water and the hay for the animals that would arrive over the next several hours. And in that not yet state, it has a specific quality that Ezra had found appealing since he was 9 years old, and his father had brought him here for the first time. It was the quality of a thing that is about to happen, the potential of it. He had always liked the potential of things. He had spent 62 years turning potential into actual on the farm and in his life, and in the specific patient accumulation of work that produces over time something that was not there before. He checked in at the agricultural gate on the east side. A young woman named Sarah from the fair's livestock division looked at his entry forms and his registration and the bill of health for the 2 Hereford bulls and the 3 cows, and confirmed each document against her list with the specific efficiency of someone who does this at 5:45 in the morning, several days in a row, and who has learned to be thorough and fast simultaneously. She handed him his exhibitor tags. She said, "Mr. Whitfield, Bay 7 as usual." He said, "Thank you." She looked at the registration form one more time, the one with the animal's show history listed. She said, "Good luck. Though looking at this paper, it seems like you don't need it." He smiled. He drove the trailer to Bay 7. Bay 7 was the bay he had used at the Harmon County Fair for the last 6 years. This was not a random assignment. The fair's exhibitor system tracked tenure and performance, and the bay assignments reflected this, tracking newer exhibitors in the outer bays, established exhibitors in the center bays with better access to water and better positioning for the show ring. Bay 7 was a center bay. He had earned it through 31 years of participation and 9 blue ribbons, and the specific, unspectacular consistency of a man who showed up every year with excellent animals and left the bay cleaner than he found it. He had started at Bay 3. Bay 3 was where the fair put new exhibitors in their first and second years, the outer bay with the narrower access and the longer walk to the water and the position at the edge of the pavilion that was first to get the morning heat when the sun came around the building. He had spent 2 years in Bay 3 with the same animals and the same preparation and the same standard of care he applied to everything, and in his third year he had won the first blue ribbon and the bay assignment had shifted. He thought about that first blue ribbon sometimes. He thought about it when he was in positions that required the specific durable kind of confidence that comes from having done something correctly once and knowing in your body and your record that you can do it again. The first ribbon had been for a Hereford bull named Callaway in 1998, and the judge had said, presenting it the best animal in this class I have seen at this fair in a decade. Ezra had thanked him and taken the ribbon and driven home and put it on the wall in the farm office where his father's certificates were also hung, and his father had looked at it for a long time before saying anything. His father had said Calvin would have liked to see that. Calvin was Ezra's grandfather who had bought the farm in '44. Ezra had said, I know it. The fair's livestock registry, which was published on a 4-foot bulletin board at the entrance to the livestock pavilion, listed the names of every exhibitor whose animals had won blue ribbons at the Harmon County Fair. The board was organized by year going back to the fair's founding in 1941. It was a public document accessible to anyone who walked through the pavilion entrance. Ezra Whitfield's name appeared on the board 9 times, the first entry from 1998 and the most recent from the previous year, which was for a cow named Piper, who was currently in Bay 7 eating the hay he had brought from the farm. Piper was a 5-year-old Hereford, 243 pounds above the breed standard, with the specific physical qualities that the judges who evaluated Hereford cattle at county fairs in this part of Ohio had been recognizing in Whitfield cattle for over 2 decades: the structural soundness, the musculature, the quality of the coat, the temperament. She did not startle. She did not pull at the lead. She moved with the specific, composed confidence of an animal that has been well cared for by people who know what they are doing. She was worth the blue ribbon. He was fairly sure she would get it. He had been bringing cattle to this fair since his father was too old to come himself. He had taken over the farm at 31, which was not the age he had expected to take it over, but was the age at which his father's knees made the decision for both of them. His father had worked the farm from 22 to 61, which was 39 years of daily physical work in the specific outdoor conditions of a Harmon County farm. The Ohio winters, the mud seasons, the summer heat that pressed down on the open fields with the specific merciless quality of heat that has nowhere to go in flat terrain, and the knees had simply worn out. He had sat down in the kitchen one November and said, I think it's your turn, and Ezra had said, I know, and that had been the transition. He had expanded the operation over the following 31 years, not dramatically. Not the kind of expansion that requires outside investment or bank debt or the specific risk of borrowed money. The slow, careful kind, adding animals when the herd size justified it, rotating the pastures with deliberate attention to soil health, investing in fencing and water systems, and the specific infrastructure of a farm that intends to be operating at the same standard in 20 years that it is operating at today. He had read extensively. He had attended county extension programs and agricultural conferences and had served on the County Extension Advisory Committee for 14 years, where he had contributed the kind of knowledge that comes from knowing one specific piece of ground very well over a very long time, which was different from and complementary to the kind of knowledge that comes from formal agricultural science. The farm was in Harmon County, 7 miles north of the fairground on the land his grandfather had bought in 1944. Calvin James Whitfield had saved the money from 14 years of field work in Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama, moving north with the specific purpose that animated a particular generation of black men in the rural South in the decades after the First World War, the purpose of owning ground. Not renting it. Owning it. The specific difference between those two things was a difference that Calvin Whitfield understood in his body before he understood it in any legal or economic framework, because he had spent 14 years working ground that other people owned and had understood at the end of those 14 years what the difference felt like. He had bought 212 acres. The land had been underpriced because black men buying farmland in Harmon County in 1944 were not the buyers the sellers were hoping for, which had made the asking price lower, which had made the purchase possible, which had made the farm what it was. Calvin had understood this irony. He had paid the underpriced price and taken the deed and built what he built on that land, and his son had built on top of that, and Ezra had built on top of that, and the 212 acres were now fully productive in every season and were assessed at a value considerably above what Calvin had paid for them, which was a kind of irony of a different order. 3 generations of Whitfields had worked that land. The land was still there. The cattle were in Bay 7 at the Harmon County Fairgrounds, settled by 6:45, eating the hay Ezra had brought from the farm, the same hay they ate at home, because changes in diet in the days around a fair affected presentation in ways that experienced exhibitors learned to avoid. He was 62 years old. He stood 5'11", with the specific build of a man who has done physical work every day of his adult life. Not the weight room build, but the functional build. The build that comes from actual work. Broad shoulders, strong forearms, a posture of practical readiness that is not rigid but is always engaged. His hair was gray, and his face was the face of a man who has spent decades outdoors in every season, weathered and specific. A face that does not perform anything because it has been doing the actual thing for too long to need to perform it. He wore his fair clothes dark jeans, a collared shirt, his good boots, the Whitfield Farms cap that his daughter had embroidered with the farm logo 5 years ago as a birthday gift, and which he had worn to the county fair every year since. His daughter Diane was 34. She had grown up on the farm and had gone to Ohio State for agricultural science and had come back to Harmon County, which was not what everyone expected, but was what she wanted, and had been working the farm alongside him for 9 years, with the specific combination of her formal training and his 31 years of specific knowledge of this specific land. She had given him the cap at his 57th birthday party, which was in the spring before the fair that year, and she had said, "So people can see the name from across the pavilion." He had laughed. He had worn it every fair since. She knew he was at the fair today. She was at the farm, managing the daily work in his absence, which she did whenever he went anywhere because the farm did not pause for exhibitions. And the daily work was the daily work, regardless of what else was happening. She would hear about the morning when he came home. He had not called her during the 22 minutes at the security station. He had not called anyone. There was nothing to call about yet. The situation was in progress, and the outcome was not determined, and making calls in the middle of a situation that had not resolved was not his practice. He would tell her when there was something to tell. He wore the cap. He carried his exhibitor pass. He was a registered exhibitor at the Harmon County Fair with a 31-year history and 9 blue ribbons. He was walking to the check-in building when Officer Speer decided to approach him. He was known at the Harmon County Fair. He was known as an exhibitor who arrived early and prepared carefully and produced animals of consistent quality, and who had won the blue ribbon 9 times, and who had never once left a bay messier than he found it, which was a standard the fair's livestock division tracked because the condition of the bays at the end of the fair week was a significant logistical burden, and the exhibitors who left clean bays were noted and appreciated. He was also known in Harmon County more broadly. Known at the feed store on Route 7 where he bought supplies on the last Monday of every month. Known at the county extension office where he had served on the Agricultural Advisory Committee for 14 years. Known at the First Baptist Church on 4th where he was a deacon and where his grandfather's name was on the foundation stone. Known at the county courthouse in the records that showed the deed to 212 acres in his name and the names of his father and grandfather before him. Known, in other words, as someone who had been here for 3 generations and who was not going anywhere and who had built something that was still being built. He finished settling the cattle by 7:20. Bay, 7 in the morning light had the specific quality that livestock bays have at the beginning of a fair. Before the day's visitors arrived, the smell of hay and animal, the particular sound of hooves on concrete, and the low conversational lowing that cattle produce when they are at ease in an unfamiliar space. The bay to his left was occupied by a Hereford pair from the Moyers farm, which had been a neighboring Harmon County operation for 40 years and which he knew well. The bay to his right was empty this morning, the occupant apparently not yet arrived. He checked the water one more time. He adjusted the position of Piper's feed bucket. He assessed each animal with the specific diagnostic attention of a farmer who knows his animals well enough to detect the early signs of stress or illness in body posture and eye response and the quality of the animal's attention to its environment. They were fine. They were in good condition, settled, not stressed. He was known in Harmon County more broadly than just the fairground. He was known at the feed store on Route 7, where he bought supplies on the last Monday of every month, and where the owner, a man named Paul Ryder, had known him for 30 years, and who had said to his son once, when the son was about to fill an order incorrectly, "That is Ezra Whitfield's order. Get it right." He was known at the county extension office, where he had served on the Agricultural Advisory Committee for 14 years, and where his specific knowledge of Hereford breeding and Harmon County's specific climate and soil conditions was considered the most useful expertise on the committee. He was known at the county courthouse in the deed records that showed 212 acres in his name. He was known at First Baptist Church on 4th Street, where he was a deacon, and where his grandfather's name was on the foundation stone which his grandfather had helped pour in 1953, which was 9 years after Calvin bought the farm, which was Calvin's way of investing in the community that was by then his community. He was known at the county school board meeting where he had spoken 3 years ago about the agricultural education curriculum and the specific gap between what students were being taught and what farming in Harmon County actually required, and where the board had voted to expand the agricultural program the following year, partially on the basis of his testimony. He was known at the Harmon County Fair in ways that extended beyond the Registry board. He was known by Gerald Hoskins, who had been using his Bay assignment evaluations as the basis for the fair's exhibitor tenure policy since 2006. He was known by Sarah in the livestock division, who had said on the phone to Hoskins that morning, "He has been coming here since before I started working here." He was known by Dr. Patricia Owens, who had evaluated his cattle 9 times and who said on the 10th that they were among the best in the state. He was known. He had spent 31 years, and his father had spent his years, and Calvin Whitfield had spent his years building the kind of presence in Harmon County that cannot be revoked by a single morning, no matter how wrong the morning was, no matter who made it wrong, no matter what questions were asked that should not have been asked. He walked to the exhibitor check-in building to complete his paperwork. The fairground was coming alive around him in the specific way of a county fair before opening the accumulation of components becoming the thing they were components of. The vendor trucks were pulling in along the East Side Road. The food court was being assembled by crews in yellow vests. The entertainment stage at the north end was receiving its cables from a crew of 4 young men who moved around each other with the specific wordless efficiency of people who had set up this stage many times. The midway rides on the west side were being unlocked and tested, which produced the particular sound of fairground machinery, the groan of metal, the test-run music. The livestock pavilion behind him was filling with the specific sound of large animals in close proximity, the combination of lowing and the low shuffle of hooves on concrete, and the occasional stamp that is not distress but restlessness. The sound of animals that are present and alert and adjusting to a new environment. Ezra had heard this sound so many times that it was part of the interior landscape of his life, the way the sound of the farm was part of it, a background that was so familiar it was almost inaudible, but whose absence he would have noticed immediately. He liked the fair. He had always liked it. His father had brought him for the first time when he was 9 years old, the summer of 1971. His father had driven them in the farm truck that was already old in 1971, the truck his grandfather had bought in the late 50s, and they had come through the east gate and parked in the dust of the exhibitor lot, and his father had taken him through the livestock pavilion first before anything else, and had explained to him the specific standards by which cattle were evaluated and why those standards existed, and what they told you about the quality of the breeding and the care and the work that had gone into an animal. His father had been specific about the standards. He had been 9 years old, and he had understood, or had begun to understand, that specificity about standards was one of the things his father considered essential, one of the things that was not optional, one of the things that distinguished doing something from doing it correctly. He had spent the following 5 decades trying to do things correctly. He had been winning blue ribbons for 26 years. He liked the measurement. He was not afraid of it. He walked to the exhibitor check-in building with the specific, comfortable stride of a man in a place where he belongs, which is a particular quality of movement that is different from confidence in the performative sense, different from the stride of someone trying to project belonging, and is instead the completely unremarkable physical expression of actually belonging to a place, the stride that does not need to be seen, because it is simply the way a man moves through a familiar landscape. He passed the pavilion entrance on his way. He glanced at the registry board. His name was on it 9 times running through the years, in the specific pattern of a record that has accumulated one entry at a time. He did not stop to look. He knew what was on it. He had known what was on it for 26 years, since the first ribbon in 1998, and the board was part of the familiar landscape of the fair, the way the livestock smell and the morning heat and the sound of the animals were part of it. He walked to the check-in building. He greeted Brower, who was at the counter with his hog registration. He said, "Good morning, Tom." Brower said, "Ezra, you brought Piper again." He said, "She's ready." Brower said, "She was a good animal last year." He said, "She's better this year." This was a factual statement. Piper had developed over the winter and spring in the specific ways that a well-managed animal develops when the management is attentive and the animal's individual needs are met. She was better this year than last. He knew this in the specific, grounded way he knew everything about his animals, not abstractly but concretely through daily observation over months. He was at the exhibitor check-in building when Officer Dale Speer found him. The exhibitor check-in building was a low practical structure near the pavilion entrance where the fair's agricultural division handled the administrative paperwork for all livestock and produce exhibitors, the registration confirmations, the show schedules, the bay assignments, the exhibitor passes that allowed access to the restricted exhibitor areas. It was staffed by Sarah and 2 other members of the livestock division at this hour, and it had the specific, comfortable busyness of an administrative operation that has been performing the same function for many years and has refined it to the point of efficiency. There were 3 other exhibitors at the check-in counter when Ezra arrived. He knew 2 of them by name. Thomas Brower, who farmed pigs and who had been coming to the Harmon County Fair for 18 years, and Angela Kowalski, who raised laying hens and who had been an exhibitor for 12. The third he did not recognize. He nodded to Brower and Kowalski and took his place in the line. Speer was 34 years old and had been on the Harmon County Sheriff's Department for 6 years. He was assigned to fairground security during the fair week, which was a rotating assignment, and which he approached with the specific self-consciousness of someone who is in a new environment and who wants to be seen performing his function correctly. He had been on the fairgrounds since 6 o'clock. He had patrolled the vendor area and the midway and the livestock section and had not encountered anything that required his intervention. He had been watching Ezra for approximately 4 minutes before he approached him. He had watched him come out of the livestock pavilion and walk through the exhibitor area toward the check-in building, and something about what he saw had produced in him a decision to approach. What that something was, he would not be able to articulate clearly in the investigation that followed. He would say he had not seen Ezra in the exhibitor area before that morning. He would say the exhibitor area was restricted. He would say he was following protocol. What the investigator would note in her report was that no other exhibitor at the fair that morning had been approached by Speer regardless of their presence in the exhibitor area, and that Ezra Whitfield was the only black exhibitor on the grounds. Speer approached him at the check-in counter. He said, "Sir, can I ask what you're doing in this area?" He approached him in the exhibitor check-in area and said, "Sir, can I ask what you're doing in this area?" Ezra turned. He looked at the officer. He assessed the question the way he assessed things that required assessment completely and quickly. The question had a specific texture to it. It was not the texture of a routine security check, which would have been different in tone and phrasing. It was the texture of a question being asked in a particular way by a particular person at a particular person. He said, "I'm an exhibitor. I checked in at 6 with the livestock division. I have my exhibitor pass." He produced it from his shirt pocket. He held it out. The pass was a laminated card 4 inches by 3 with his name and exhibitor number and the fair's seal and the bay assignment printed on it. It was the same pass issued to every registered exhibitor at the Harmon County Fair. He had received his first one in 1993 and had received one every year since. The pass this year was identical to last year's in every meaningful respect except the year printed on it. He held it out. Speer looked at it. He looked at it with the specific, prolonged attention of someone who is examining something but is not sure what they are looking for in it. He said, "This exhibitor area is for confirmed exhibitors." Ezra said, "I am a confirmed exhibitor." He said it with the measured, specific tone he used when he wanted to be precise without being combative. The tone of a man who has decided what he is going to say and is saying it. Speer said, "I'm going to need to see some additional documentation. Do you have ownership papers for the animals you've brought in?" Ezra looked at him. He considered the question. The question was asking for something that did not exist as a standard exhibitor document, which was a specific kind of question. The kind that requests documentation that no one carries in order to produce the appearance of an insufficient response. Every exhibitor at this fair had gone through the same registration process. Every exhibitor had submitted the same bill of health for their animals and the same ownership registration form to the livestock division 3 weeks before the fair. That documentation was on file with the livestock division. It was not carried in a shirt pocket to the check-in counter. He said, "The animals have been registered with the county fair for 3 weeks. The registration is on file with the livestock division. Sarah at the east gate has those records. I can walk you there if you want to confirm." Speer said, "I'm going to need to see ownership documents." Ezra said, "I don't carry the cattle's ownership papers to the fair. No exhibitor carries those to the fair. The registration process handles that. The documents are in the livestock division's files." He was saying this clearly. He was saying it with the specific precision of a man who has just said something accurate and who is waiting to see what the person who asked the question does with an accurate answer. What Speer did with it was he repeated the request. He said, "I'm going to need to see some documentation for the animals." Ezra held himself still. He thought about the registry board at the pavilion entrance 20 feet from where they were standing. He thought about his name on it 9 times. He thought about Sarah at the check-in counter 6 feet to his left. He thought about Brower and Kowalski, who were both watching. He said, "The documentation is with the livestock division. It has been there for 3 weeks." Speer said, "I'm also going to need to verify that your trailer is legally parked." Ezra looked at him. He said, "The trailer is in the exhibitor lot on the east side. The position was assigned by the fair's logistics team when I checked in at 6 this morning. The assignment is in the fair's records." Speer said, "I'll need to verify that." He picked up his radio. Ezra stood. He stood in the exhibitor check-in area with the exhibitor pass in his hand and the morning fairground continuing around him and Speer on his radio, and Sarah at the check-in counter and Brower and Kowalski watching, and the registry board visible through the open door of the building, and he stood, and he waited, because he had been doing this for 31 years, and he knew how fairs worked, and he knew how this was going to resolve, and the resolution was going to take however long it took. He had time. He had been preparing for this fair for 3 weeks. He could wait for however long it took. Ezra stood in the exhibitor check-in area in front of the fair's livestock division booth with his exhibitor pass in his hand and waited while Officer Speer made calls that did not need to be made. He waited with the specific patience of a 62-year-old man who has been waiting in positions like this one at various points in his life and who has developed through those positions the internal architecture required to wait without being consumed by the waiting. He was aware of the fairground around him. The morning was warming. It was July, which meant that the early cool would be gone by 9, and the heat would be serious by noon, which was relevant to the cattle's comfort, and which was one of the calculations he made every year in deciding the show schedule for each animal. The exhibits that required prolonged ring time were scheduled for the morning hours when possible. He had thought about this on the drive from the farm. He was aware of the other exhibitors. Brower and Kowalski were both watching with the specific indirect attention of people who are witnessing something they recognize and who have not yet decided what they are going to do about what they are witnessing. The third exhibitor, the one he did not know, had moved slightly away from the counter. He was aware of Sarah. She had looked up when Speer approached, and had continued to look with the expression of a woman who processes quickly, and who was already Ezra suspected forming the decision she would eventually make. He held the weight. He noted the time, 7:27. He noted the registry board at the pavilion entrance visible through the check-in building's open doorway. 4 feet of bulletin board organized by year going back to 1941. His name on it 9 times. The first entry from 1998, which was 26 years ago, which was before some of the people currently on the fairground had been born. He thought about what it meant to be standing here, not as an abstraction. As a specific concrete physical fact, he was standing in the exhibitor area of a county fair, where he had been an exhibitor for 31 years, being asked to prove he was allowed to be there while his name was visible on the public record of the fair 20 feet away. He was holding an exhibitor pass that had been issued to him that morning after verification of the full set of registration documents. He was wearing the Whitfield Farms cap his daughter had given him. He was 62 years old, and he had been coming to this fair since he was 9 years old, and his father had driven him here for the first time in the old farm truck. He had spent 62 years building the specific internal durable thing that allows a man to stand in a moment like this one without losing the clarity required to manage it correctly. He had it. He used it. He held himself completely still. He had thought about what it cost to handle situations like this one correctly. He had thought about it many times over 62 years in positions of varying severity and varying stakes. He had thought about the cost in time and in the specific internal resource that patience requires, which is not passive but active, the active choosing moment by moment to remain in the correct posture within an incorrect situation. He had thought about the cost to his sense of his own standing in a place where he had standing the specific weight of having to prove yourself in a context where you have already proven yourself many times to many people who are not the person you are currently proving yourself to. He had always paid this cost. He would pay it now. He waited. Speer finished his radio call. Speer said, returning from his radio call, "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me while we sort out the documentation." Ezra looked at him. He said, "Where would you like me to go?" Speer said, "The security station. It's at the main entrance." Ezra said, "All right." He went. He walked with the specific, deliberate pace of a man who has decided what he is doing and is doing it through the exhibitor area, past the check-in building along the path that led from the pavilion to the main gate and the security station near it. Speer walked beside him. The 3 other exhibitors at the check-in counter watched him go. Brower's expression was the expression of a man who knows what he is seeing and who has not yet decided whether knowing it requires him to do anything. Kowalski said something to Brower in a low voice. The third exhibitor looked away. Sarah from the livestock division picked up her phone while he was still visible through the check-in building's open door. She called at 7:31. She said, "Mr. Hoskins, it's Sarah at livestock. Officer Speer is taking Mr. Whitfield to the security station. I don't know exactly what the issue is, but Mr. Whitfield checked in at 6, and his paperwork was perfect. And he has Bay 7, and he has been coming to this fair for 31 years. I thought you should know." Gerald Hoskins was at his office in the administrative building on the west side of the fairground. He had been at the fair since 5:30, which was when he always arrived on opening day. He was 64, the son of a Harmon County farmer himself, a man who had grown up at the fair as a participant and who had run it for 18 years as a professional, and who understood the fair in the specific way that comes from knowing it from both sides. He knew Ezra Whitfield. He had known him for 26 years, since the first blue ribbon in 98, and he had known him specifically and concretely, the quality of the animals he brought, the standard of his bay maintenance, the specific way he interacted with the fair's staff, which was always direct and respectful and efficient. He put down his phone after Sarah called. He walked to the security station. He walked fast. He arrived at 7:49. Ezra had been sitting at the security station for 18 minutes. He was sitting in the chair with the specific composed stillness that Hoskins would later describe in his complaint as, and I quote directly, the patience of a man who has been here a long time and who knows that this too will resolve, but who should not have had to be patient in the first place. Hoskins stood at the table. He looked at Ezra. He said, "Ezra, what is going on here?" He said it with the directness of a man who is asking not because he doesn't have a hypothesis. He had a hypothesis formed within 30 seconds of Sarah's call, but because he wants the answer on the record spoken out loud in front of the officer who created the situation. Ezra said, "I'm not sure, Gerald. I checked in at 6. I have bay 7. My animals are settled. I was doing my paperwork when Officer Speer asked me to come here." Gerald looked at Speer. He said, "Officer, can you tell me what the issue is with Mr. Whitfield?" He asked it with the specific level tone of a man who manages a public institution and who is managing a situation in front of witnesses and who understands that the specificity of the answer is going to matter in what comes next. Speer said I needed to verify his exhibitor status and his trailer registration. Gerald said his exhibitor status was verified when he checked in at 6 this morning. The check-in log shows the time, the gate, and the bay assignment. The exhibitor pass you examined was issued after that verification. The trailer registration is in the logistics records, and the trailer is in the assigned position in the exhibitor lot. He said, he has been an exhibitor at this fair for 31 years. He has won the blue ribbon 9 times. His name is on the registry board at the pavilion entrance, which is a public document that any person on this fairground can read. Is there a specific concern about his exhibitor pass that was not resolved by reading the information printed on the pass? Speer said I needed to verify the ownership documentation for his animals. Gerald said, the ownership documentation is verified during registration. That process was completed 3 weeks ago. I have Mr. Whitfield's registration on file in my office. Would you like me to get it? He asked the question with the specific tone of someone who already knows the answer and is asking in order to put the absence of a good answer on the record. Speer said nothing. Gerald held the silence for a moment. He said, the exhibitor pass Mr. Whitfield showed you is the standard pass issued to every registered exhibitor at this fair. It is issued only after verification of the registration, the bill of health, and the bay assignment. It is the documentation that confirms exhibitor status. Is there something specific about his pass that indicated a problem? Speer said I was verifying his documentation. Gerald said the pass is his documentation. He held the silence again. He was not doing this for Speer's benefit. He was doing it because the record of this conversation was going to be in his complaint, and the record would be clearer if the specific inadequacy of Speer's responses to specific questions was visible in the account. He said, I'm sorry, Ezra, this should not have happened. Ezra said, I know, Gerald. He said it without bitterness and without the particular performance of patience that people sometimes produce for observers who are watching how they handle something. He said it simply because it was simply true the way he said everything that was simply true. He walked back to Bay 7. He walked through the exhibitor area and past the pavilion entrance and past the registry board with his name on it 9 times, and he did not stop at the board. He knew what was on it. He had known what was on it since the year after the first ribbon when the fair had posted his name for the first time, and his father had come to see it in person, specifically to see it in person, driving the farm truck. The 7 miles from the farm on a midweek day, when there was other work to do to stand in front of the pavilion entrance and look at the board. His father had not said anything for a long time. Then he had said Calvin's name should be on there. He had meant this is his too. Ezra had said, I know it. He walked to Bay 7. His animals were where he had left them, settled and eating, entirely indifferent to the procedural complications of the previous 22 minutes. Piper looked up when he came in, recognized him, and returned to the hay. The bulls continued what they had been doing. The other cows were at the water. He checked the water. He checked the hay. He went around the bay with the specific diagnostic attention of a person who has been doing this for 31 years and who knows what normal looks like for each of these specific animals, and who can detect in the quality of their attention and their posture and the rate at which they are eating whether anything is wrong. Nothing was wrong. They were fine. He stood in Bay 7 with his animals around him, and he let the specific quality of the previous 22 minutes settle in him the way things settle when you give them space to settle, not processing them away, but simply letting them be what they were. He thought about his grandfather. He thought about Calvin Whitfield in 1944, buying 212 acres of ground that the seller did not want to sell him at the price it was worth, and doing it anyway and building on it anyway and handing it to his son, who handed it to Ezra, who was standing in Bay 7 at the Harmon County Fair with 5 cattle and a 31-year exhibitor history and 9 blue ribbons, and the specific irreducible fact of all of it. He thought about what it meant to be a man who builds things that outlast the specific situations he encounters along the way. The farm would be there when this morning was a memory. The registry board would be there. The records would be what they were. He checked Piper one more time. She was in excellent condition. She showed every indication of being ready for the ring. He resumed his morning. The formal complaint was filed the following day. It was filed by Gerald Hoskins, who had spent the evening after the fair's opening day writing a specific chronological 4-page account of what he had observed and what the context was and what the documentation showed. He was precise in his writing. He had been running the Harmon County Fair for 18 years, which meant he had seen the full range of situations that a county fair can produce, and he had written accounts of some of them for various official purposes over the years, and he had learned through this experience that the value of a complaint lay in its specificity, not in the emotion it expressed, but in the facts it documented and the way it documented them. He attached the following Ezra Whitfield's exhibitor registration for the current fair, showing his 31 consecutive years of participation and his 9 blue ribbon entries. The exhibitor check-in log for the current fair's opening day, showing his check-in at 6:03. The bay assignment record showing Bay 7 assigned to Whitfield. The exhibitor pass log showing the pass issued to him at check-in. He also attached, because he thought it mattered, a list of every exhibitor who had been active in the livestock pavilion between 6:03 and 7:27 that morning, which was the duration of Ezra's activity before being stopped. The list included 14 names. 13 of them were white. None of them had been stopped by Speer. He noted this in his account without editorializing. He submitted the complaint to the Harmon County Sheriff's Department's Internal Affairs Division. The department acknowledged receipt and assigned an investigator within 48 hours. The investigator was a woman named Helen Voss, who had been in the department's Internal Affairs Unit for 7 years and who had the specific measured approach of someone who understands that investigations produce findings and that findings must be defensible. She reviewed the complaint and the attachments. She reviewed Gerald Hoskins' account, which was specific and credible. She reviewed the security log from the fair entrance, which confirmed Ezra's check-in at 6:03. She reviewed the county fair's livestock registry board, which was a public document that she photographed at the pavilion entrance. The board showed 9 blue ribbon wins, attributed to the Whitfield farm, the most recent from the previous year. She reviewed the exhibitor log and the bay assignment records. She reviewed Speer's own incident report, which described his encounter with an unidentified exhibitor in the restricted area and his attempt to verify credentials. The incident report did not address why the exhibitor pass he had examined was insufficient, or why he had asked for ownership documentation that no exhibitor is expected to carry to the fairgrounds, or why he had requested verification of the trailer's parking assignment when the parking assignment was documented in the fair's own logistics records. She reviewed the list of exhibitors present that morning. The list was drawn from the check-in records and the bay assignment logs. It contained 23 names. She cross-referenced the list with Speer's activity log for the morning of the fair's opening day, which showed where he had been at each reported time and what interactions he had logged. He had logged one interaction in the course of a morning during which 23 exhibitors were active in the livestock area, and during which multiple vendors and staff were also moving through the exhibitor zone. One interaction. The interaction was with Ezra Whitfield. She reviewed the 23 names on the exhibitor list and noted their demographic characteristics with the specific, precise notation that the investigative format required. She completed her report in 14 days. The findings: selective enforcement of restricted area access protocols resulting in the unauthorized detention of a registered exhibitor. Sustained: improper use of detention authority in the absence of specific cause. Sustained: Speer received a formal letter of reprimand, placed in his personnel file a 30-day suspension without pay and mandatory training in equal application of law enforcement authority at public events. He did not return to fair security duty that year. He returned to his regular patrol duties after his suspension. The mandatory training he completed covered equal application of law enforcement authority at public events, crowd management, and the specific protocols governing exhibitor verification at county fairs and public agricultural events. The training included a module on the specific documentation systems used by county fairs and what they mean, which meant that going forward, any officer assigned to fair security in Harmon County would know that an exhibitor pass is the documentation that confirms exhibitor status, and that requesting additional documentation beyond the pass is not supported by the fair's protocol or by the law. He did not return to the Harmon County Fair in any official capacity the following year. His assignment for the following year's fair was reassigned to a different officer. Ezra Whitfield won the blue ribbon on day 1 of the fair. He was back at bay 7 by 9:30, which was when the preparation process needed to begin. The preparation process for a show animal on the morning of a show was specific and sequential and could not be rushed. He had performed it 31 times at this fair and many more times at other venues, and he had the specific efficiency of someone who has done a complex task so many times that its sequence has become automatic, a fact of the body rather than a procedure of the mind. He worked on Piper for an hour and a half. He worked with the focused, unhurried attention that the work required. He was not thinking about Officer Speer. He was thinking about Piper. He brought her to the ring at 10:55. The ring was in the center of the livestock pavilion, a space that had been cleared and fenced for the show with bleachers on 3 sides that were filling with the fair's visitors. Families, farmers, the county extension representatives who attended every year, the reporters from the Harmon County Gazette who covered the agricultural awards as part of the fair's coverage. He led Piper into the ring. He had led animals into rings many times. He knew the specific quality of attention it required: the lead held correctly, the pace set correctly, the positioning adjusted to show the animal at its best from the judge's angle. He did all of this with the complete absorbed attention of a man whose entire professional knowledge was focused on a single task. Piper moved well. She moved with the specific composed confidence of an animal that knows its handler, that is not startled by the ring environment that presents itself, because it has been raised to be what it is, and it is good at being what it is. The other animals in the class that morning were good. 2 were excellent. Piper was better. The judge was a woman named Dr. Patricia Owens, who had a doctorate in animal science from Ohio State and who had been evaluating livestock at the Harmon County Fair for 12 years. She walked the line of animals with the specific diagnostic attention of someone who knows exactly what she is looking for and who takes the evaluation seriously as the professional exercise it is. She paused at Piper. She looked at her for a long time. She asked Ezra to walk her around the ring. He walked her around the ring. Dr. Owens watched. She said, "Thank you." She returned to her evaluation position and looked at the full class for another 5 minutes. At 11:43, she announced the results. She said, presenting the ribbon, "This is an exceptional animal. I have been evaluating at this fair for 12 years, and this is one of the best examples of the breed I have seen at any county fair in this state." The ribbon was blue. It was the 10th. Ezra took it. He thanked Dr. Owens. He led Piper back to Bay 7. He held the ribbon for a moment before attaching it to the bay post. He looked at it. He thought about his grandfather, Calvin James Whitfield, who had bought 212 acres of Harmon County farmland in 1944 from a man who had told him in the course of the transaction that he hoped someone more appropriate would have made an offer first. Calvin had not responded to this. He had paid the asking price and taken the deed and walked out of the transaction with the land. He had built on the land. His son had built on top of that. Ezra had built on top of that. The ribbon was a blue ribbon at a county fair. But it was also the 10th entry for his name on the livestock registry board at the pavilion entrance of the Harmon County Fair, and the board went back to 1941, and his name had been on it since 1998, and it would be on it again this year, and the board was a public document that anyone could read. His grandfather would have understood the weight of that. He attached the ribbon to the bay post where the others had always gone in the position that the exhibitor custom reserved for the winning ribbon upper left of the post where it was visible from the aisle. He checked the animals. He checked each one with the specific systematic attention of a farmer who knows his animals, and who is checking for stress, for dehydration, for any sign that the heat or the noise or the unfamiliar environment had produced a condition that needed addressing. They were fine. They were all fine. He straightened up from the last check. He stood in Bay 7 with 5 healthy animals and a blue ribbon on the post, and an afternoon still ahead of him, the afternoon show schedule for the bulls, the regular feeding and watering the mid-afternoon, checked the final cleanup before the evening. He had work to do. He did it. He did it with the same attention and the same standard he had always applied to it. The standard that did not adjust based on whether the morning had been what it should have been or whether it had been what it was. The standard was the standard. The animals needed what they needed. The work was what it was. He thought once in the mid-afternoon about what he was going to say to his daughter when he drove home that evening and she asked how the fair went. He was going to say Piper won the blue ribbon. He was going to say it is her 10th, our 10th. He was going to say she was the best animal in her class, and Dr. Owen said so, and it is on the record. He was going to say that because it was what mattered. He was going to tell her about the morning, too, because she would want to know, and because it was the kind of thing that deserved to be said out loud to someone who loved the farm and understood what the farm was and what it meant that it had been challenged that morning by someone who had not bothered to look at a 4-foot board at the entrance to a pavilion where Whitfield cattle had been winning blue ribbons since Diane was 8 years old. He had thought once during the wait at the security station about his grandfather. He thought about Calvin Whitfield in 1953 helping to pour the foundation stone at First Baptist Church on 4th Street. He thought about what it meant to do that work in Harmon County in 1953, to participate in building a community institution in a county that had not, at the time, particularly wanted the community he was building it for. He thought about Calvin doing that work anyway, going there in the morning and doing the work and going home in the evening and coming back the next morning and continuing. He thought that is what building something looks like, not the dramatic confrontation. Not the moment of recognition, not the satisfaction of having your name read out loud. The daily return, the continuation, the specific, irreplaceable act of showing up again. He showed up every year. He had been showing up since he was 9. He was going to show up tomorrow for day 2. He drove home that evening at 7:15. The fair did not close until 9. But the livestock exhibitors with early check-in the next morning left earlier, and he had a 30-minute drive on Route 7, and the animals needed a final check before he left, and the equipment needed to be secured for the overnight hours, and the specific sequence of closing tasks for a fair day was the same sequence it had always been efficient and complete. He drove the route he had always driven. He had driven it 31 times. He knew its specific qualities, the long, straight section after the Route 7 turnoff, the hill past the Moyers farm, where the road dipped and then rose the county road east of the ridge, where the farm was visible from the road when the angle was right in the evening light. He had driven it in every condition that Harmon County could produce. October, cold July heat, early April, mud, the specific quality of a fair week evening when the summer light held until 8 and the fields had the specific gold tone of late July at 6,000 feet of altitude. He saw the light in the kitchen from the county road. Diane was in the kitchen when he came in. She looked at him with the specific attention of a daughter who knows her father, and who had received no call from him during the day, which she had noted because he was a person who called when something required a call, and who did not call when the situation was in progress and not yet resolved. And the absence of a call did not mean nothing was happening. It meant something was happening that had not yet resolved. She said, "How did it go?" He said, "Piper won the blue ribbon." She was quiet for a moment. He said the 10th. She said the 10th. He said Dr. Owens said she was one of the best examples of the breed she had seen at any county fair in the state. She said, "Tell me the rest." He told her. He told her the way he told things specifically sequentially without embellishment. He told her about Speer's approach at the check-in building. He told her about the exhibitor pass and the question about ownership documentation. He told her about the 22 minutes at the security station. He told her about Gerald Hoskins arriving and the specific level way that Gerald had asked Speer to account for what he had done. He told her about walking back to Bay 7 and the animals being exactly as he had left them. She listened. She did not interrupt. When he was done, she said, "I'm glad Gerald was there." He said, "So am I." She said, "And Piper won." He said, "Piper won." She said, "Our 10th." He said, "Our 10th." She looked at the window for a moment at the evening fields visible through the glass. She said Calvin would have liked to see that board. He said, "Your grandfather told me the same thing about his father." She nodded. She put dinner on the table. They ate. He was going to show up tomorrow for day 2, and then he was going to go to bed. And in the morning he was going to come back to the fair and do the second day. The work was daily. It had always been daily. The records said what they said. The farm said what it said. The 10 blue ribbons on the post in Bay 7 said what they said. He had never needed anyone's recognition to do the work correctly. He had been doing it for 31 years. He would keep doing it. The records said what they said. They had always said it. They would keep saying it long after the morning that Officer Speer chose to approach the only black exhibitor in the Harmon County Fair's livestock area and ask for documentation that no exhibitor carries documentation that the registration process had verified 3 weeks earlier, documentation that would never have been requested of the 22 other exhibitors who were present that morning. The records would say all of that too. Subscribe our channel to hear the stories that deserve to be told, the ones that mattered and were witnessed and were documented and that belong in the record alongside everything else that the record contains.